Watch right now on Project Front News. Russian Iskanders lined up near the Polish border are not there for nothing. The war between Russia and NATO will begin in Kaliningrad. Crimea, powerful strikes on Russian military bases. Ukraine is taking back the peninsula. A deadly cauldron for Putin's army in Donbas. The Ukrainian armed forces are grinding up Putin's soldiers like meat. Fiery, intense, and melting. Footage from the front lines. Watch right now.
Greetings, this is Vladimir Timoshenko with you, and we begin right away with the main topic. Russian Iskanders in the Kaliningrad region. These images have spread around the world, and everyone understands perfectly well. It is precisely Kaliningrad that could become the place where a full-scale war between Russia and NATO begins. Why this particular city? Was NATO even prepared for such a scenario? Our next report is about this.
The starting point. A war between Russia and NATO begins with the Kaliningrad region.
Kaliningrad is undoubtedly one of the most important regions of Russia. Our outpost in the west.
The Kremlin is preparing new provocations. The Russian army has moved Iskanders closer to NATO's borders. NATO has declared its readiness to strike Kaliningrad instantly. The Kaliningrad region is the westernmost region of the Russian Federation and is an exclave completely separated from the main territory of Russia by other countries. Russia has effectively turned the Kaliningrad region into a military base. The main formations include ground forces, aviation, and the largest naval base of the Baltic Fleet.
The Russian enclave has always been militarized. It is located, as it were, in the heart of the NATO space, between Poland and the Baltic Sea, with Belarus nearby hosting tactical nuclear weapons and missile systems. Looking further ahead into the future, this significantly means that the region of Kaliningrad is progressively becoming a highly special militarized zone, which consequently creates substantial and significant risks for the entire North Atlantic Treaty Organization alliance.
Kaliningrad very often becomes the center of Russian saber-rattling. In this way, Putin is testing the waters of NATO's capabilities. For example, during the joint Zapad and 2025 exercises with Belarus, the military practiced combat operations on the territory of the Kaliningrad region. After that, the Kremlin transferred Iskander missiles there, which posed a threat to 6 alliance countries.
Undoubtedly, this is a clear and deliberate probing of NATO's immediate reaction, thoroughly testing its operational capabilities, meticulously checking established response protocols, and certainly mirroring these aggressive actions. These significant and provocative actions fall under the intense scrutiny of the highly experienced general staffs of the opposing countries, carefully analyzing every detail.
For Russia, a direct confrontation with the North Atlantic Alliance is widely seen as absolutely necessary. It should be understood that the next stage of retaining power by the current ruling clique, that is the Putin regime, is at play here. The current Putin regime, in its very essence, cannot truly exist in conditions of genuine peace. Indeed, it simply cannot endure or thrive in a state of truce. As of this very moment, it appears that it can exist and maintain its power only within a perpetual state of ongoing conflict and war.
According to experts, all the provocations by the Russian authorities in the Kaliningrad region currently amount to nothing.
From a military standpoint, Kaliningrad is absolutely not a knife in the back. It is a vulnerable location. Russia will have to save Kaliningrad instead of Kaliningrad or the Kaliningrad region, serving as some kind of springboard for a large-scale operation. Most of the military units in the Kaliningrad region are currently empty, since their personnel have been redeployed to Ukraine. Overall, the Kaliningrad region is the Achilles heel of Russia in Europe, specifically for the Russian Federation.
Back in July, NATO allies announced the creation of a plan to neutralize the Kaliningrad region, which is intended to counter threats from Russia and ensure global deterrence.
What the military-industrial complex of NATO countries is doing today, to put it mildly, does not entirely correspond to the modern challenges and evolving circumstances. That's why the question arises, are NATO countries ready to deploy, for example, their 50 Leopards there against 2,000 to 3,000 Russian drones per day? Well, in Ukraine, Russia is currently using on average 1,500 drones per day in the first wave of drones. Is NATO ready for this? No.
Putin now needs to demonstrate NATO's inability to handle such provocative situations. Russia is interested in creating discord within the alliance. It needs division and the undermining of unity in order to create a serious crisis within NATO.
And now about the temporarily occupied Ukrainian Crimea. Russia is strengthening the air defense of the peninsula much more intensively than the protection of its own oil refineries. Telling, isn't it? But Ukraine is methodically reclaiming Crimea with powerful strikes on enemy military targets several times a week. But there is another very interesting point. Which countries are already ready to help our army with weapons to reclaim Crimea? That's exactly what we'll talk about next. Crimea in the crosshairs. The temporarily occupied peninsula is at the center of attention for Ukrainian special services. The Ukrainian armed forces have been increasingly harassing the peninsula and successfully inflicting defeats on the enemy. Reports of successful operations by various units are appearing almost every week.
The temporarily occupied peninsula in Crimea is turning into a Chernobyl for the Russian occupiers.
At the beginning of the summer, the Security Service of Ukraine struck the Crimean Bridge for the third time. The underwater supports were severely damaged at the level of the seabed. This was made possible by 1,100 kilograms of explosives. In fact, the bridge was in an emergency condition. And here, the good drones of the Ukrainian armed forces paid a visit to the Russian invaders' airbase in Hvardiyska, not far from Simferopol, where they successfully struck two enemy Mi-8 helicopters. Their estimated value is up to $30 million, and a Russian tugboat was also hit. Russian ships are in crosshairs of Ukrainian special services. Main intelligence directorate destroyed a Russian Black Sea Fleet ship near Novorossiysk. The Ukrainian armed forces struck a ship that the Russians had put into service in 2015. Its value is about $60 million.
The Black Sea Fleet has reduced the activity of its operations in the Black Sea Basin to a historic absolute minimum. This is one of the clearest confirmations of the success of the Ukrainian Defense Forces operation. At the main command of the Russian Federation, Ukraine's defense forces and special operations forces are currently destroying Black Sea Fleet vessels. And as a result of the successful actions of Ukraine's defense forces and the Ukrainian armed forces, about 35% of the Black Sea Fleet's vessels have been destroyed.
And here, special forces struck a Russian radar system from the S-400-3 U air defense complex. Here is another Yenisei radar from the S-500 complex. The destruction or even damage of all these radars leads to the disarmament of Russian air defense in Crimea, which is currently represented by two anti-aircraft missile regiments.
On the Crimean Peninsula itself, there is a hunt for Russian air defense systems, and Russia has found itself in a hopeless situation. Crimea is a trap for Russian air defense, which is being systematically and methodically destroyed. And this is because the territory of the Crimean Peninsula is, by its nature, enclosed. It is a closed space. It is impossible to constantly relocate positional areas, to change them like gloves, to move them 24/7.
In other words, for a very short period, Russian air defense in Crimea seemed blinded and fast. It is simply impossible to replace these enemy systems without withdrawing similar ones from other sites.
It not only affects the defense capability of the temporarily occupied peninsula itself. The point is that it is depleting the entire Russian air defense system overall. That is, within the territory of the Russian Federation itself, the destruction of air defense systems is not such a systematic and constant phenomenon. But it is specifically Crimea where the destruction of these complexes has already become systematic, that is forcing Russia to pull air defense systems from its mainland to the territory of Crimea. This depletion, this forcing Russia to act as we need, allows us to continue destroying their air defense systems.
Over years of Russian occupation, Crimea has become a Russian military base. Ukrainian forces' attacks increasingly destroy the aggressor's military economy and logistics.
Overall, of course, attention will also be paid to the positional areas where these air defense systems are deployed across the temporarily occupied peninsula. Crimea, the same goes for Mr. Henkut. This is Feodosia. These are airfields after all, and there are numerous military facilities there connected to military units and so on and so forth. That is, there are quite a lot of targets across the peninsula today that should be struck both by kamikaze drones, attack drones, and by something more powerful with a more powerful warhead.
Crimea is Ukraine, so the armed forces of Ukraine will strike military targets and legitimate objectives until Russians leave Crimea and liberate occupied territories. And now let's move to the Pocrovsk direction of the front. Let's be honest. This is a sacred goal for Putin and his entire gang, and accordingly, the situation here is stretched to the limit. In the Pokrovsk direction, Russian invaders made 43 attempts to push back our defenders from their positions in the areas of the settlements of Shakov, Vladimirovka, Novaya Shakova, Lisovka, Zvereva, Kotlina, Udakhnaya, and towards Krasny Liman, Rodinskoye Pokrovsk, Novopodgorodnoye, Molodetskoye, Moravka, Novopavlovka, and Filia. The defense forces are holding back the onslaught and have repelled 39 enemy attacks. Fighting is still ongoing in 7 locations. Ukrainian assault troops are driving the enemy into a trap in Donbas, a real hellish cauldron for the occupiers near Dobropillia. Ukrainian forces are carrying out one of the most successful operations in recent months. The enemy has found itself in operational encirclement, and its losses are several times greater than those of the Ukrainians. All the details are in our exclusive report. Let's watch.
Ukraine's defense forces have delivered concentrated strikes on Russian command posts in the Donetsk region. Enemy personnel, including officers and command staff, specifically the headquarters of the Center Troop Grouping and the 41st Combined Arms Army, came under fire and suffered losses. These formations have been deployed by the Kremlin right now to one of the most intense sectors near Pokrovsk. The strike itself was carried out back on September 8th. However, information about its scale and results has only just become known. Notably, just a few days before the attack, on August 28th, these same headquarters were inspected by Russian Defense Minister Andrei Belousov. His visit was meant to demonstrate control over the situation. However, Ukrainian missiles turned the command posts into ruins.
Strikes on these military targets have significantly disrupted the command and control of Russian armed forces units and subunits. Ukraine's defense forces continue to deliver precise strikes against the aggressor's facilities to force the Russian Federation to end its war of conquest.
Meanwhile, the occupiers' futile plans to seize Donetsk region have been shattered by the strength and cohesion of the Ukrainian army. The enemy turned out to be unprepared for either the strategy or the resistance. And Ukrainian troops have moved on to liberating settlements, systematically driving the Russians out of their occupied positions, turning their attempts at seizure into complete defeat. Ukrainian defenders managed to literally cut off the so-called pincers in the area where the occupiers had wedged themselves into the defense forces' positions. During the counteroffensive, 7 settlements were liberated, including Pankov and Komnati, which had previously been captured by the enemy. The Russians' attempts to gain a foothold in these territories turned out to be complete failures. This operation was carried out by the 225th Separate Assault Regiment with the support of National Guard units from the 1st Azov Corps.
Everyone was engaged in eliminating this breakthrough, and within a few days it was neutralized. The defensive operation is still ongoing. They are clearing them out.
During the fighting, the REF army found itself in a real hellish cauldron and suffered significant losses. According to the main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense, up to 1,000 personnel were involved. Now the Kremlin is trying to send in its best fighters to unblock the encircled units, but the outcome is already predetermined.
The Ukrainian defense forces in this direction managed to create an operational encirclement of Russian units, which were cut off from their logistical support bases.
But they are not only holding the line, they are also launching active counterattacks.
Ukrainian fighters on the Dobropillia front are literally sweeping away all enemy attempts to hold their positions and spread their chaos.
During the latest successful counteroffensive actions, Ukrainian forces have shown their strength and respect. As a result, another settlement has been liberated. This, once again, has significantly strengthened the positions of Ukraine's defense forces and has prevented the Russian occupiers from carrying out their plans to unblock encircled Russian groups and consequently from advancing deeper into Ukrainian territory toward the administrative border with the Dnipropetrovsk region. The situation is difficult and changes literally every hour, but it should be noted that at this moment there is no threat of further breakthroughs by Russian occupiers in this direction toward the administrative borders of the Dnipropetrovsk region.
The defense forces are also carrying out successful counterattacks in the Pocrovsk direction. This concerns two settlements, Novoekonomichne and Dakhne. This has taken the issue of an operational encirclement in the Pokrovsk direction off the table. In addition, there have been tactical successes in the area of the settlement of Razina.
In the area of the settlement of Razina, Russian occupiers were amassing small assault groups with the aim of further breaking through toward the settlement of Rodinska. Rodinska is of interest to the occupiers because it offers the possibility of establishing direct control over the only paved road. This is essentially the main location of the Ukrainian defense forces. The issue here is the possibility of the operational encirclement of the Ukrainian defense forces and accordingly the blocking of logistics for Ukrainian defenders. At the moment, these scenarios of the Russian occupation forces have failed.
In addition, the defense forces are conducting counter-sabotage operations, destroying small assault groups that managed to break through and tried to gain a foothold in the urban area. Ukrainian troops have also liberated the settlement of Filia on the administrative border between Donetsk and Dnipropetrovsk regions. This has reduced the enemy's ability to advance deeper into the Dnipropetrovsk region. However, unfortunately, the difficult situation persists in the Kostyantinivka and Ilmen directions.
The occupiers are trying to create an operational encirclement of the Ukrainian defense forces in the Kostyantinivka direction. Pressure is being applied from three sides. From the direction of Toretsk, this includes the combat areas of Delievka and Yabunika, and accordingly in the Chasiv Yar direction. In addition, the occupiers are trying to break through the Ukrainian defense forces lines along the Pokrovka-Stansinok highway. At the moment, the occupiers control the commanding heights in Toretsk and Chasiv Yar, which allows them to keep not only the eastern outskirts of Kostyantinivka under fire control, but also accordingly the operational reserves of the Ukrainian defense forces. There is further advancement of the occupiers towards Siversk, and there is also progress by the occupiers in the Serebryansk forest.
Right now, the main thing for the Ukrainian defenders is not to give the enemy even the slightest respite. The coordinated actions of the defense forces show that any attempt by the enemy to break through and gain a foothold ends in failure.
Well then, let's analyze the current situation on the Novopavlovka sector of the front. The bloody rampage of the enemy army continues here as well. On the Novopavlovka direction, the aggressors tried to break through the defenses of our troops in the areas of the settlements of Sekhnevoy, Voskresenko, Kamyshevaha, Ternovoy, Olgovka, and towards Filia, Ivanovka, and Berezovoy. The defense forces also repelled 10 enemy assaults and another 5 clashes are still ongoing. They are just a few hundred meters away from the occupiers. The infantrymen of the 65th Mechanized Brigade are holding back the invaders in the Zaporizhzhia region. It's madness. Constantly under enemy fire. The fighters spend at least 10 days here. They say that leaving from the front line is a deadly operation in itself. TSN correspondents met the infantrymen after another rotation. Now you will see these.
In complete darkness, the long-awaited headlights appear. The infantry of the 65th is returning from their position.
God bless you, Commander. God bless the best people in the division. The band of brave eagles.
The guys spent more than 10 days on the front line. The only desires recognized are those of the soul and rest. But first, a call home.
Hello?
Hello, how are you?
It's okay, I'm already there. Everything is fine.
Leaving the position and reaching the point where the driver will face an extremely difficult task due to the enemy who is constantly on guard. Drones.
Drones. You just start jamming them with the EB and drones start flying right away. FPV on fiber optics.
It's not much easier at the positions where the Russians keep trying to break through the defensive line. The Russians are hitting our infantry with mortars, artillery, and banned phosphorus munitions. Without sleep, the infantrymen have to be on combat alert practically 24/7.
The guys survive however they can. Some with cigarettes, some with coffee, others with energy drinks.
After reporting to the commander, the infantrymen head home, which now looks like this.
The first times we got here, what was it like to sleep in a sleeping bag like this and on a bed like this? No one had any idea, but now we've kind of gotten used to it.
The senior at the position is Dragon. He's only 23, and 5 of those years he served in air defense during the war. And he's already spent almost a year in the infantry. He recalls how in his first battle he captured a Russian AK-12.
Now, a profound silence awaits us, a deep and tranquil stillness.
Now silence awaits us? Somewhere around 89, something like that.
Have you already used it? Well, have you at least fired it for yourself?
Yes, I even fired it at the range, zeroed it in, it shot well.
He also has a captured Mavic which he shot down when it flew up to our positions.
My combat pants bring me luck. They've been with me since the very beginning of my service in the infantry.
Even though he'd like to rest now, he says he lives for the war.
After 5 years in the army, I can't see myself in civilian life anymore. To go on vacation to the mountains, to the Carpathians, but there aren't enough people to replace me.
The infantry positions are constantly attacked by Russian FPV drones. Just recently, in one day, 15 attack drones flew at the soldiers, one of which they managed to capture as a trophy.
Overall, you could say it's mass production, Russian style. By the way, the drone is ready for use.
However, the enemy hardware damaged their equipment.
Everything burned down, the electronics. Now it all needs to be restored. All the war is going on.
To recover what was lost, the soldiers started a fundraiser. Because without a radio and a generator, it's simply impossible for them to work.
Well then, now let's move to the Lyman direction of the front, where the enemy is also getting active. In the Lyman direction, the invading army carried out 8 attacks near the settlement of Kolodyazi and towards the settlements of Shandrihailov, Stavki and Zarekhny. Currently, 2 significant clashes are still actively ongoing. The advanced Saffron combat laser system was thoroughly tested during the extensive West 2025 exercises, which were notably held in Belarus. In addition, Russia once again deliberately took the opportunity to overtly frighten the entire world with its formidable nuclear weapons. Let's take a much closer look at these very important topics in our next detailed segment.
On the last day of the West 2025 exercises, the Russians and Belarusians decided to impress the world with their wonder weapon called Saffron. Propaganda media outlets spread the news online that at the Borisovsky training ground north of Minsk, they tested a mobile combat laser system capable of destroying small UAVs at a distance of 1 kilometer. All that is known about it are the specifications announced by the presenter. The target engagement time is less than 10 seconds and the crew consists of 3 people. Back in the summer of 2024, Russians reported that Russia and Belarus had prepared a new combat laser for testing. The Belarusians even made a report from the LEMT Scientific and Technical Center, which has been developing laser technology since 2023. The designers called their creation the Hyperboloid and showed the first assembled prototype.
The system, developed at the Belarusian enterprise, can operate in conjunction with various radar systems. The Belarusian system is installed in special containers. The laser is deployed on a platform directly at the moment of use and operates in a pulsed mode. This means that the energy flash can only be detected during the active engagement of a target. In addition, the entire system can be installed not only in special facilities or underground for camouflage purposes, but also deployed on mobile platforms.
In May of this year, a Belarusian public page that publishes information on military-related topics posted these 2 photos. In one photo, there's a falling drone, in the other, the so-called combat laser Saffron. From this, analysts concluded that the system had been tested. And now they've announced it at large-scale exercises that the so-called Union states are conducting near the borders of NATO countries. Ukrainian analysts have already criticized this show, saying that the Russians were flaunting a prototype in front of observers and participants from other countries. Moreover, as with other so-called unparalleled projects, this weapon is most likely a repackaged Chinese solution known as Silent Hunter. The most interesting part is that earlier the Russians did the same thing based on it only under the name Nomad.
What's interesting is that the Russians themselves admit this. The laser complex shown in the photo is a Chinese development called the Low Altitude Laser Defending System, or LAS. The name Silent Hunter also appears online. This is an improved version of the LAS system with a power output of up to 30 kilowatts available in both stationary and mobile variants, and was most likely developed by the Chinese Academy of Engineering Physics.
Recently, the Kvadrat was spotted heading west in 2025. This is a Russian terminal that is positioned in Moscow as an analog to Starlink. This equipment was used to provide communications for units and elements of the regional troop grouping. There is no information about it in open sources, but visually it resembles the American system. It is known that Kvadrat is designed to transmit large volumes of data at the regimental or divisional level, with the capability to use different communication systems, with secure email and video conferencing. In addition to Kvadrat, terminals called Sprint were also used during the exercises. Information about them only surfaced recently at the end of June, when Russian media reported on deliveries to the 20th Combined Arms Army of the Western Grouping. And of course, aside from the new equipment, the Russians and Belarusians saved maneuvers involving the notorious Oreshnik for the finale of the exercises.
Among the most significant events were activities such as planning and reviewing the use of non-strategic nuclear weapons, as well as the assessment and deployment of the Oreshnik mobile missile complex. Our esteemed Russian colleagues generously shared their invaluable combat experience with us, which profoundly allows us to confidently state that our operational units are now consistently receiving the most utterly up-to-date, the most truly advanced and comprehensive information which they are integrating into their combat operations both mechanically and automatically.
The Zapad 2025 exercises turned out to be larger in scale than analysts had expected. The armies of Belarus and Russia carried out several maneuvers at once and showcased their own developments. After several years of being an information outcast, Minsk hosted dozens of foreign journalists and delegates. The dictators' armies enjoyed rattling their sabers so much that they promised to do it again in 2 years.
And now it's time to analyze the operational situation on the Kramatorsk and Donetsk fronts. The Russian world continues here as well to destroy, kill, and maim. In the Kramatorsk direction, the enemy twice attempted to break through the defenses of our defenders in the areas of the settlements of Alexandra Shultino and Belaya Gora. In the Donetsk direction, the enemy carried out 12 assault operations in the areas of Shkerbinovka, Toretsk, Poltavka, and in the direction of Pleshcheyevka, Rusyn Yar. 2 military clashes are still ongoing. American weaponry continues to arrive for the Ukrainian army. But in addition to the armed forces of Ukraine, the National Guard has also begun to receive it. Recently, the world's best infantry fighting vehicles, the Bradley, have been put into service with the NGU Kartia Brigade. Special correspondent for TSN, Andriy Tsaplienko, found out exactly how the National Guard plans to use this offensive weaponry.
The American Bradley fighting vehicle always lifts the spirits of infantrymen on the front line, and it's easy to see why.
It has power, it has weight, it has armor, and the armament is quite impressive.
These vehicles have proven themselves excellently on the battlefield with the armed forces. Now the National Guard has received them as well. The Heart Brigade is already practicing assaults, disembarkation, and evacuation of the wounded using the Bradley IFV. Essentially, that's exactly what this vehicle was designed for.
And everyone, guys, as fast as possible. The main thing is pace, timing. We have very little of it.
The Bradley must quickly, ideally in just a few seconds, unload the troops and pick up the wounded. In real conditions, every such rotation takes place under fire. That's why, to minimize losses on the battlefield, the Bradley crew and its National Guard passengers are learning to act in sync like a well-oiled clockwork mechanism.
The guys need to know the sequence of actions. There are a lot of nuances. In the same way, now the guys will go through, in theory, how to open the emergency door, how to close it, and a bunch of other details. But all of this needs to be in our heads. There should be a working template.
But the main thing to understand is that during disembarkation, it's almost guaranteed that a gift from an enemy drone will arrive. The Bradley IFV is a very fast but massive vehicle. Here in the north of the Kharkiv region, the air is thick with enemy reconnaissance drones. In good weather, enemy scouts can spot the American IFV from several kilometers away from the front line, so everything in the enemy's arsenal will be aimed at it. The company's chief sergeant in the National Guard believes that in his sector, armored vehicles have lost their relevance for now, even ones as advanced as the Bradley.
To be honest, right now, I see very few opportunities to deploy and use it in a way that would be safe for my people. Right now, as they say, it's better to go in on foot. This Bradley vehicle is well protected, it's hard to take it out with anything. But the issue is that we have the rear part, the ramp. Even with those same spotters right now trying to drive up to a drop-off point in such clear weather, they'll spot us while we're still on the move, even 10 kilometers before we reach our positions, and they'll be waiting for us.
However, the weather can turn bad, the situation can change, and the infantry will have to drive the enemy out of captured settlements. Then the Bradley, which has already become a classic of the Ukrainian war, will become relevant again. And it seems that the National Guard troops are now preparing precisely for such a moment.
That's all for today, but very soon on Front News, there will be new, unique reports from our journalists, and from the hottest spots of the war, gathered so that you know the truth. This was Vladimir Timoshenko with you. Take care of yourselves and your loved ones.